I've been meditating on a regular basis. I'm just curious. Okay, that sounds like quite a few people are into meditation. And how many of you have been praying on a regular basis? Oh my goodness, like literally everyone. So that's great. Okay, so how many of you have been doing prayer and meditation together? Okay, some people are integrating those two together. Wonderful. This is great. So we are in good hand. This is one of those subjects that has been very, very, very close to my heart ever since I started actually my training as a marriage family therapist. That was early 1980s actually. This subject was very, very fascinating to me. And in fact, I remember when I went for the interview, because this was not my marriage family counseling was not my first graduate degree. I wanted to switch. I wanted to really explore the vast interface between the faith, the mystical aspects of the faith, and the science of psychology. That was very fascinating to me because the two of them are really about changing human behavior, ultimately. And the head of the department at the Laverne University asked me why I was coming to study marriage family therapy. After all, I had a background in economics of developing countries. So I said, well, you know, I have a very strong, long time mystical background as a Baha'i, and I would like to see how that would be integrated with the science of psychology. She got really, really mad, really upset, and well, just to be, so she would not be, out of place, she made sure that I realized that that is absolutely a no. You do not mix science and religion together. That was the time. Actually, around that time, the people who started the mindfulness movement, they were just beginning to pave the ground and plow the way, and they were looking for ways to bring this whole movement of mindfulness to the West, who was allergic to spirituality. It was. So they were very, very shrewd and smart. John Kabat-Zinn. How many of you know the work of John Kabat-Zinn? Yeah, he's not very many people. He is really, we owe it to him for his perseverance and wisdom and bringing this whole notion of mindfulness as a secular practice for the purpose of dealing with the physical needs and ills of the patients who would go to their physicians, and both the physicians and the patients would say it was not very helpful. So the whole interaction between the health business and the patients was just not very favored at that time. So John Kabat-Zinn decided, this is something that he was a practicing Buddhist. So he said, okay, they can bring meditation and mindfulness into the West, but they definitely knew that if they do it from the perspective of spiritual practices of Buddhism, the whole nation is just going to say no. So they said, okay, we're going to distill it. We're going to take out the spirituality out of it. We're just going to sell it and market it as something that will help a secular practice that will help you to be better, more focused, less frazzled, and so that was the beginning of this whole notion. So, In order for, I think that needs a little bit of focus, or is it focus to you guys? No. So, I'm kind of tied to this thing, but I think I'm going to risk falling off. And get this thing out of here. Let me see. Okay. She tied me really well. So let's see if I can go over there and focus this thing.
Here, I'll hold it.
Thank you.
That's better.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, for all of you who have good eyes. So, in order for us to just really appreciate the role that mindfulness plays and has played, and also the role that the writings of the faith plays in elevating, transforming, or calming the human mind, I'd like to present to you this very fascinating five-pointed star. Those of you who are familiar with the workshops that I do or see some of the videos on YouTube, you know that I use this five-pointed star quite a bit because for me this is the interface between cognitive behavioral approach to therapy and the writings of the faith, because it has all the different zones that Abdu'l-Baha talks about. What? The 5 physical powers that we have, right? So what are those 5 physical powers? You know that, right? Our 5 senses, right? The 5 senses that we have, which really is the means that we would physically, materially relate to the world. Otherwise, there's no, the world does not exist. Either you see someone, you see something, you smell it, you taste it, you touch it, you hear it, and that's it. So that is what happens, that's the sense perception. Abdu'l-Baha calls that our physical powers. Abdu'l-Baha talks about also our spiritual powers. So what are our spiritual powers? Anybody can tell me? Imagination is one of our spiritual powers. Memory, what else?
Comprehension.
Our thoughts. Abdu'l-Baha talks about our reality. This is in Paris talk. He says our reality is our thought. So that means that since we have 2 realities, right? We have a spiritual self and we have what? A lower self. We have a Darth Vader and a Luke Skywalker, always with us, always. And depending on which one of them we feed more, that one has the force. Goes like that. So how do we feed it? We give it more room to really rule over the kingdom, which is us. So since we have these 2, we have spiritual powers as well as physical powers. And the whole coming of the manifestations of God is because one of these 2, the spiritual reality in us, it's in stage of capacity, not completely fulfilled. Why? We know Abdu'l-Baha talking about that in our physical powers, we are fully developed as an animal, you know, like all other animals. But we are not really developed spiritually. So we have really very little notion, therefore we need training. So I like to give you a couple of stories in order to elaborate on that. How many of you know the story of Majnun in 7 Valleys? Okay, a few people know it. I hope that you read it. It's a fascinating, first of all, 7 Valleys is a very small book. But in that 7 Valleys, a nice, beautiful story that Baha'u'llah refers to the story of Majnun. It goes like this. Majnun was this very, very devoted lover of a girl. Her name was what?
Layla.
Everybody knows that. Okay. Layli. Well, Majnun was in love with Layli so much that he would look for her everywhere. And one day he was even digging in the dirt. And somebody came and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking for Layli." They said, well, Layli is not in the dirt. He said, doesn't matter. I look for her everywhere until I find her. So you see, this how crazy he was. Anyway, so he was not eating, he was not taking care of himself, he was all disheveled, he was weak, he was really, really bad way. And so finally he said, okay, one more time I'm going to go and see if I can find Layli, my beloved. So he comes out and he looks so bad. Two what?
Watchmen.
Two watchmen look at him. Basically, the senses of the watchman sees Majnun looking like that. They think, oh gosh, this guy is up to some trouble. And they feel very what? Concerned for the community. And they want to what? Chase him, arrest him. And so what do? They will start chasing after him. And Majnun, looking at these two watchmen coming after him, what does he think? Oh my goodness, I'm going to be in trouble. I better get out of here fast. He's feeling what? Scared, and he wants to really get away, and he starts to... This is really the cycle of our mental processes of experiencing life, whether we... when we see the watchman coming, we wait and we experience or we exercise mindfulness or pause, or we just remember that this is dangerous, we better keep an eye on that two watchmen and run as fast as we can. We become very mindful. Our brain is very much fit for things that are dangerous to us. That's how our brain is designed, to detect it and protect us. However, our brain is not developed to detect things which are not near us, or spiritual matters, or even social issues. So our brain sitting over here is not going to be worried about racism or climate change, or even if there's some gases in here that you cannot smell, you're not going to worry about it because you can't. So that's how our brain is designed. So we need different senses to really be able to navigate ourselves in relation to one another. And those are our spiritual senses. Among them is our feelings. Okay. So Majnun they're running after, and finally Majnun is so afraid and so upset because he's thinking, how God can be so cruel? In my state of weakness, he's sending these two watchmen after me. I can't even, I haven't eaten for days. I can hardly walk, so I'm supposed to be running like this. He says, oh, who are these? Are these God? How can you be so cruel? Are these Israel, the angels of death you sent after me? So he's running, but still he's running. So he comes across a wall, and either he has to surrender, or he has to do what?
Climb the wall.
Climb the wall. And all of us sometimes in our life, come to a place where we are supposed to make that decision. And God willing, we make the right decision. So Majnun decides he's going to have to climb the wall. So he scales the wall and jumps on the other side, and he is very delightfully surprised because Layli is walking in the garden with a lantern in her hand looking for her ring. Well, the minute Majnun sees that, what does he think? Oh, they were not the angels of death, oh God, they were Gabriel. His idea completely changed. What is he feeling now? Beyond delight, what does he want to do? Just circle around Layli, right? And he just shows his delight. Baha'u'llah, in this spot in the Seven Valleys, says, if man could see the end at the beginning, he would not be so distraught and upset about the events of life. Why he says that? Because we are incapable of, our brain is incapable of seeing future. Much is concealed from us. So therefore, we lack the wisdom of navigating ourselves in the spiritual context of life. We are just as good as any animal. We can we can detect threat coming our way, somebody, a snake. Oh yeah, definitely. We see it and we act. Either we freeze, or we run, or we fight. Either of these three. But detecting these kind of things, we are very, very unfortunately in trouble and very weak. So this matter of being concealed has been explained in many different ways in the writings. The other thing which I like to share with you is that we need to have it in the back of our mind, is a story from Rumi. How many of you have read and studied? This is, by the way, this particular story of Rumi in poem is one of the places that he mentions the name of Baha'u'llah according to the scholar, beloved scholar, Abdul Hamid Eshraq-Khavari. And if you read it, you can see it. Anyway, in this poem, Rumi talks about the 5 thieves who were going to rob the castle of the king. How many of you know that story? Okay, so I will tell you. Nobody knows the story. Rumi was so much, by the way, revered and loved by Baha'u'llah that Baha'u'llah considered Rumi to be most illumined, learned of the Islamic dispensation. And you know that Masnavi is really inspired by Quran. So it's the Persian Quran in a way. So anyway, these four or 5 thieves, one night they were going to go and rob the castle of the king, Shah Mahmud, I believe. And they are each boasting about, each one of them, about their powers, what kind of powers they have. And all of a sudden, the king was, that night, was pacing the streets because, there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was no newspapers, nobody knew even what the king looked like. So he could be anybody. So he would dress normally as everybody else, and he would come to the streets just to see what's going on in his kingdom. So he comes across these 5 people and he says, what are you guys, what are you up to? And they say, oh, we just want to, we are on a project tonight and we are going to be going to the castle of the king. And the king says, I would love to come with you guys too. That would be wonderful, that's exciting. And they say, well, what we have, all of us have very special powers. What is your power? So the king says, well, tell me about your powers. So they say, I'm just paraphrasing, by the way, the story. So they say, one of them says, yo, you know what? I have this ability that if I see, that when animals talk in the middle, wherever they are, when they talk, I know what they're saying. They say, wow, this power is very, very needed for us. The other one said, well, my power is I can, if it is completely pitch dark and something is around me, I can see it, even in the dark, and the next day, I recognize it. They said, wow, we need your power. The other one says, well, I have this power. My hand is so strong, the thickest wall in the world, I just punch into it, and the whole thing opens. They said, well, we definitely need that. And the other one says, well, I got this power, my hands are so strong, I can throw something in a rope, and I climb any big building. They said, well, we need that too. Anyway, so they say, okay, to the Shah, what do you got to offer to this whole collection of powers? He says, well, I got this mustache. If I just move my mustache, whichever way it is, a guilty person will go free. They said, whoa, yeah, definitely, we need that. So they said, okay, so you're in, let's go. So they all go, well, they're going to the castle of the king, and king is watching all of this. And the guy who can hear and understand the animals, hear a dog going by, barking. He says, this dog is saying, the king is with you. And everybody absolutely thinks that's just hilarious. And that's how we are, by the way, as far as our brain is concerned. If we don't want to see something, nobody's going to force us to see it. And that's how we become a believer or not a believer. That's why Baha'u'llah has left it to human will He says, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. So really, the responsibility is on us. Yeah, none of them paid attention. That's just outrageous. So they go and they rob the castle of the king. I'm going to make the story short. And they all go home. And the king knows exactly who was robbing his castle. So he sends the Farash, the gods. They go and get all these 5 people. And he sits on his throne. And the guy who had claimed that he can see things at night and he recognizes the next day, he says, that is the king. He was with us. He was with us, but he cannot believe it. But, okay. He didn't say anything, so the king gives them all death sentence. He knows who they were, he knows what they did, there's no other proof needed. So all of a sudden, this guy who recognized him, he decides, you know what? Either he has to muster the courage and say something, or they're all going to be dead. No. In no time, he says, my lord, can I say something? He says, yeah? He said, well, there was another person with us. And that person needs to also play his role. And the king realizes that this guy knows who he is. He says, my lord, I mean, that we have a person with us who came with us, and he could move his mustache, and we all will go free. The guilty will go free. And so Sultan Mahmud decides, well, you know, he needs to be keeping his word, so he does let them go free. But the point was that Rumi is making is, we always are walking with the king, always. But how many of us recognize the responsibility and the privilege of traveling with the king? Yeah? And that is about one of the subjects of mindfulness with the rod and the light of the Baha'i teachings and Baha'u'llah's guidance. That remember, any decision you make, any move you make, the king is walking with you. Okay? Now, the third story that I like to put in there for you to have a perspective. This was a very dear, beloved patient that I had that is no longer in this world. I would call her Annette. So somehow Annette came with great deal of physical and mental burdens on her, and so much so that she would look at everything which was coming her way, she would think there's no use for this life. And you know, there's a wisdom to this. Abdul Baha talks about it. There comes a time in our own physical life that we say, you know what, I just don't want this anymore. Let me free, set me free. And that's why at the end of his life, Abdul Baha said to his daughter, she says, I'm leaving, you're bringing me food? You're bothering me with stuff like that? I'm ready to go, what are you talking about? So she was kind of like right there, and in the meantime, she was dealing with death and going and all kinds of things like that. She was very interested in the subject of death, and even life after death. So it just so happened that week or whatever, and this was, I don't know, maybe 25 some years ago, in my office there was a pamphlet about a meeting about life after death. And she had never ever heard about the Baha'i faith, and generally I don't go ahead and teach the faith to my patients. We practice many of the spiritual principles, whether they are Baha'is or not, because these are the laws of gravity. You know, when you're walking with someone, you want to help them walk and not fall. You really observe the law of gravity. So there's really no exception. The law is the law, as the police guy comes and says when they stop you. and so she said, she took this pamphlet. I had no idea, I wasn't going to interfere, and she went to the meeting. Of course, over there they told her, oh, guess what? Your therapist is a Baha'i. I don't know. So she comes back and she tells me, hey, I went to that meeting. Everybody told me you were Baha'i. I said, yes, I am. So, so she started exploring the faith. It didn't take very long. She became a believer. However, that means that she transported herself, according to Baha'u'llah, from one world of sphere of values, not virtues, but values, which are very different from one another, to another sphere. And in this new sphere of values, she was believing in the oneness of all humanity, in equality of men and women, and she was just absolutely in high heaven. And she had a very interesting, at times dark sense of humor, and she was just using it all the way. And one of the ways she started participating was she would make very luscious, delicious chocolate cakes, take it to the fireside. In the meantime, she really was not she was not a person who would relate to others, but she had 2 dogs, and one of them had died, and she was still mourning the dog, and this other dog she loved so much that nothing in the world would be more dear than this dog. The dog would sleep in her bed, I mean, anything. She would just give her life for this dog. So one day, at the same time, I don't want to forget, she had a husband that did not travel with her from the sphere that she was before to this new sphere. He remained in the previous sphere of the values, very devout Christian, and very much kind of a fundamentalist in the way he dealt with everything. And so he thought that if you don't believe in Christ, you go to hell, and he did not hesitate to tell her that he's afraid that she will go to hell. But she was in such high spirit, she was not going to budge for that. But he would interfere if he could. He would do some roadblocks for her so she would not be going to the meeting, because he was afraid for her. It wasn't that malicious, he was scared. So one day she makes this very delicious chocolate cake, and she comes to take it to the fireside, and the whole side of the cake was gone. And what does she think from the story I told you? Her thought first goes, darn this husband of mine. He destroyed the cake, so I will now go to the meeting. So started criticizing him and blaming him in her mind. What do you think, which side of her was doing that? Yeah, the lower self, obviously. You know, breathe not the sins of others, so long as thou art thyself a sinner, shouldst thou transgress. From this command, Baha'u'llah says in hidden words, accursed wouldst thou be, and to this I bear witness. The king is telling us, I am witnessing what you're doing. That's scary. So she said, he did it. He is the one. And so she gets ready. By the way, she had the habit of hitting him. Okay. And I told her, please do not, because she was big and he was not very big. And I was really afraid something would happen to him. And so she's ready, standing in the kitchen, ready for him to come through the garage door, and she's going to go at him. Well, lucky for him, when he walks through the garage door, the dog walks through his legs, and the dog had chocolate cake all over his face. So the minute she sees that, you see, her brain could not detect that. Her brain could not go there. Her lower self was just looking for an excuse. So when she sees that, she thought, oh my goodness. What did she think? Did she think about the husband?
No, poor dog.
She says, oh my goodness, my dog is going to die. And she was feeling what? Scared for the dog. And she wanted to take him to the vet. You know, dogs cannot really eat chocolate. And that's what she did, threw the dog in the car. Now again, we come to this whole notion, mindfulness. Why mindfulness? What does mindfulness teach us? that makes this whole process perhaps less risky movement. Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. By the way, this is John Kabat-Zinn. By the way, our human brain is absolutely incapable of not judging. So anybody who tells you that, the closest you can come to it is suspending your judgment. But this brain is created for judging, because if it wasn't, you would be eaten by the tiger and you would not even make any move or protect yourself. That's what the function of the brain is. But to be able to suspend it, maybe you could do that. You say, well, I'm thinking that my husband did, but let me see if I can consult with someone, if I can say a prayer about this, maybe I can just, hold it and not act on it. Yeah, that, with practice, we might be able to do that. This kind of attention nurtures greater awareness. This is the goal of mindfulness. Clarity, that means, maybe my husband didn't do it. And acceptance of present moment. Acceptance of present moment is something which is unique to the mindfulness process, because that's really all they are dealing with. This process does not deal with the future, with the goals of the future, with the goals of humanity, none of those things. Only the moment and how you handle the moment. So are you able to pause, take deep breaths, and figure out, unless somebody is really, coming at your child in the middle of the highway, and I would recommend no mindfulness. Go get the person. Go get the kid. Okay. Now, again, John Kabat-Zinn, he says, just watch this moment, he suggests, without trying to change it at all. So this is not about having a better idea, or God says, don't go rob the castle of the king. It's none of those things. It's just being aware. You're going to rob the castle of the king, that's what you're doing, and that's what you're doing. You're watching it. You don't judge it, you don't say this is good, this is bad, that's all you do. And it says, then what do you feel? So a great deal of attention to our feeling. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling calm? Am I feeling peaceful? So you become good in detecting one of the parts of your system that gives you signal, which is very important, by the way, that is used in therapy. Actually, when I started my practice, all they wanted to know is how people were feeling. I said to myself, my goodness, I come from a culture that they value the way we think. So is anybody interested in the way I think? And they were not. At that time, cognitive behavioral therapy was not yet anything, so nobody was interested. All they were interested was feeling. And now, by the way, for those of you who have happened to visit a therapist, which is wonderful because they are there to help us, they are becoming to second thought this extraordinary, unuseful notion of, okay, how do you feel? And then leaving the person in the rut of how they feel. Okay, fine, they feel upset. Well, what are you going to do with it? That's the question. So, so what do you hear and all those things? So that's the notion of it. And so as a result, you're going to be have the notion. There are 300 kind of feelings in the English language. And by the way, those of you who visit the writings and let's say long obligated prayer, there are mentions and references to feelings that you do not see in any other place, such as, my heart melted within me and my blood boiled in my veins. You do not find that anywhere. So really, learning how to tune ourselves, how to tune our emotions to the spiritual realm is taught to us through the writings. So that is our tuning fork, to know when to be sad, when to be happy, when to be high, when to be low, not the material waves that come and goes, and it's really of no consequence or not much of a consequence. So that's why Baha'u'llah tells us, he says, obey my commandments for the love of me. So if we don't know what is love of him, we will not know how to obey him. and we will not obey him. So those of us who are dull in our ability to really recognize our emotions, we will not be able to really be very good lovers of the beloved. We can't, because we just don't have what it takes. Because a relationship with Baha'u'llah is not a cognitive relationship. It's an emotional relationship. And when we don't have this emotional relationship, we don't do very well in our marriages either. Because we can be hijacked by other things, and if our beloved partner comes and says, you know, that makes me really upset when you're driving so fast, I get nervous. We say, what the heck, you know, I'm not doing anything, I'm just going, you know. You want me to just do it your way? So we would defend ourselves. We don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm making you feeling uncomfortable, I don't want to do that. You know, which is really walking with the other person, feeling with the other person, having empathy, cognitive empathy, emotional empathy. These are things that we develop when we read the writings, when we read the prayers of Abdul Baha, when we go to the, we stand up with the obligatory prayer. It says, make my prayer a fire, that will burn away the vein that has shut me out from that beauty. We are going in chase of his beauty. It's an emotional journey. It's not a cognitive journey. So knowing our emotion and having a recognition of our the mystical feeling, it's absolutely necessary for us to travel with Baha'u'llah and travel with Abdul Baha. So now, for those of you who are, and I have people ask me, by the way, oh, I'm going to go to a meditation weekend, and what do you think? And they have all kinds of notions about the going in there and completely blanking their mind, well, I tell you something, they go over there and they're going to be big deal surprised. The onrush of just garbage comes out of their brain, because that's how our brain is. So it's like, do I have garlic breath? Is there enough oxygen here? Or my leg is about to fall off. I wonder if I can, you know, I'm going to faint. Yeah, these thoughts are going to come. But in mindfulness, you're supposed to just watch it. Some mindfulness processes, you just watch what's happening. And don't get perturbed, don't get upset, just let it happen. Okay, the waves are happening over there, and you're standing over here, you're watching it. Another type of mindfulness practice, you bring your mind back, like a yo-yo. You say, oh, no, come over here, nothing, you know, on the breath. You just keep your focus on the breath. I don't want you to be running around. And so this practice of bringing it back to the breath, hopefully it will calm the mind, calm the brain, and then it will be focused for a few seconds. But not longer than that. So you have to be really realistic about this whole notion, not to get perturbed that your mind is not going to stay still. And so there is another kind where they claim that mindfulness really deals with depression, anxiety. One of the wonderful scientists, Daniel Goleman. How many of you know Daniel Goleman? Daniel Goleman, I would definitely suggest you read his 3 classics. One is Emotional Intelligence, one is Social Intelligence, and the newest work is Focus. It's about attention deficit, what's happening to our attention, multitasking. Brilliant work. Daniel Goleman talks about, do not ever think that mindfulness practice will be a substitute for psychotherapy. Absolutely not. Why? Because just observing yourself doing crazy stuff is good, but it's not going to teach you what not to do and how not to do it. And a therapist's job is to do that. However, I believe that many of us can use the writings. If we do use it regularly in meditation and in reflection, in consultation, and also in consultation. We learn a lot of wisdom, because the greatest tool to come closest to the truth in this world is what? Consultation. There is no other. Coming close. We're not going to ever know absolute truth or wrong or right, But when we have consensus in consultation, we have come closest. So respecting that tool of consultation. Now, the light is on it, but you can see how thousands and thousands of people come together in different parts of the world in the name of mindfulness. But there is something very unique about it, which is different than this gathering here. What do you think is the difference?
We are united.
They are, each one of those people are really trapped or secluded in their own thought process, separate from the rest. They have no idea what the values the person sitting next to them carry. For all we know, they could be somebody with values that would blow you away if you realize what they think or what they believe. But the thing is, you will never know because they're not going to talk about it. Actually, they're not talking about anything. They're just going to be looking at what's happening in their brain, and they're not going to share it with you. And you do the same thing. So this process, this whole notion of unity does not happen. While Baha'u'llah says, "O my servants, free thyself from the fetters of this world, and loose thy soul from the prison of self." Baha'u'llah talks about the prison of self. Which self is this? The lower self. Yes, the higher self, which is exactly the will of Baha'u'llah, we need to enter in that. In order to move from the lower self, reign of lower self, we need to free ourselves from it. We need to say, no, I'm not going to gossip. I'm not going to see faults in other people. I'm not going to yell and scream and get angry. So that is a practice, a daily practice that we do when we stand up and say, "Oh God, please, do not look upon my hopes and my doings. Nay, rather, look upon thy will that has encompassed the heavens and the earth." And by just looking for that will, just wanting to know what it is, we become actually curious, and that curiosity, that focus, that wanting to find will ultimately guide us. We will find someone to consult with, we will find a prayer to consult with. Ultimately, we liberate ourselves and we fly out of the cage. So, what mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn says, is the best way to capture a moment is to pay attention. Yeah, he's right. This is how we cultivate mindfulness, and he is right. This is secular mindfulness. Mindfulness means being awake. Just some of you who are tired, they work very hard all day. You might take a nap right here, which is fine. It means knowing what you're doing. That means taking responsibility for your thoughts, taking responsibility for your feelings, taking responsibility for your decisions, taking responsibility for your actions. It doesn't say, "Oh well, you know what, I was too tired, so that's why I did that and that." That's defending. That's not taking responsibility. And really, in all relationships, we need to be able to take responsibility for our thoughts, our actions. And that's what you say at the beginning of the spiritual assembly, that our thoughts, our views, our feelings may become as one reality. That means all the members of the assembly manifesting the spirit of union throughout the world. Then we become a spiritual assembly. Until then, we were just a bunch of people sitting there around the table. That's not a spiritual assembly. In our assembly, we say 9 prayers, everybody says prayers, and then we say an opening prayer, for us just to walk into the gate of being a spiritual assembly. So, as you see, the beach is the place they can come together, but not really together. Why mindfulness meditation spread in the West? Basically, I want to summarize it, was a lot of things were right. Internet was there, the environment, the political environment was right. Very prominent people in the field, like John Kabat-Zinn, like Daniel Goleman, they went to India, they were practicing Buddhism. Maybe they did not like the control that the Christian clergy had over the people here. They found that they can really carve their own way of worshiping. That's my guess. So they gave a lot of effort and time and ingenuity to make this something that the world would embrace it. And they went to Google, they went to the army, it's everywhere now. I mean, literally, it's everywhere. I remember one time, we were doing an empowerment program in Pomona Unified School District with kids. Fortunately, we were able to use many of the Baha'i values, such as oneness of humanity, love for humanity, elimination of racism, equality of men and women, being illuminated. All of these values we could use, and the kids would sing the songs, and they sing the prayer, make these youth radiant, and the principal and the superintendent, they all love it, because this is helping the kids. My goodness, you can see. But some years ago, somebody started a meditation program at the school, and some people at the school absolutely axed it, because they said this is not a Christian practice. So you see, so all these things were basically now being taken away from as obstacle. So compatibility with Western values means basically secular. They did not want it to be a competition for anybody's religion. So it doesn't matter whether you had a religion, you didn't have a religion. Now you thought or you think you're spiritual, which I really do not know what do they mean by that. So we have to kind of look at that whole notion of what it means to be spiritual. For me as a Baha'i, spiritual means I am able to reflect the light of the universal light. Then I am spiritual, and there are certain criteria for that. So some of the effort that they did was to really attract the attention of many scientists. I remember maybe about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I went to a conference in San Francisco for mental health professionals, and that was the first conference. There were 300 people. The first time they came and they talked why religion is important, that we don't have a sense of self. Well, that was like a shock for many of all the therapists. There's no self, so who are we? And then they talked about meditation. One researcher came from Arizona. It was the first, and they were so excited about it. And now everywhere is mindfulness. So the physical aspects of mindfulness, I don't have any really argument about it, because science looks at it and it comes down, but definitely claiming that it's dealing with post-traumatic stress and depression, absolutely not. And science does not at all support that, so therapy has to come into that. Science examines the brain and its function, but some years ago, one of the gurus now, who's a psychiatrist out of UCLA, he was in UCLA, Daniel Siegel, wrote his first book. I remember at that workshop, I was just blown away. For the first time, the book was called The Developing Mind. For the first time, he separated the mind from brain. Oh, I was like tickled. I said, wow, that's nice, really nice. I especially asked him, I said, you really are separating the two from that? Because up to now, everybody was saying that they are the same. He said, no, this is it. And he became one of the really people in the frontier of mindfulness. And he had to be walking very, very carefully, because they could axe him. But now, the ground is safe. So our brain is designed for some near threat, as I said. This is Daniel Goleman. Like a tiger approaching, but it is blind to the microscopic and macroscopic changes to the global system that support life on the planet, and that's where the damage is being done. Daniel Goleman is concerned that this mindfulness business is going to appease a lot of people and blind them to further search for remedies that is approaching us, like the global climate change, like wars, like whatever is coming, tsunamis that are coming our way. I mean, this mindful business that somebody sits down and they become focused on themselves is going to really leave us vulnerable to the things that Baha'u'llah warns us. So, the other person that is wonderful to look at is, by the way, what time do we have? I want to be very mindful. After time. So how much time do we have? Okay, so in about 10 minutes, would you let me know? Because I want to be able to leave some room for your questions, okay? Another person, neuroscientist, who has done a lot is Dr. Neuberg. And he wrote this book called How God Changes Your Brain. Basically, the gist of it is this. Whoever is your God, if your God is money, if your God is angry, if your God is kind, if your God is someone who basically, the minute somebody does something wrong, they're going to send them to hell. Whoever is your God, your brain is going to become that. Because none of us, he explains it, none of us really have the same kind of God as everybody else. What we believe as God is unique to ourselves, even as Baha'is, because we have a kind of a way of looking at it. I mean, we might be a lot more close to one another. Baha'u'llah says God is an unknowable essence, but ultimately when we come to kind of imagine it, it's going to be the figment of our imagination. For the Baha'i revelation, the believers at least have the willingness to sit together and listen to one another. They're not intimidated by each other's image of God. But my goodness, don't you dare to go and talk to somebody else who's coming from a belief that you're going to be challenging their way of looking at God. They're not going to be happy. I went to a funeral just a little while ago, not very far. This was a Muslim funeral, and I had no idea. They told me that there's the cemetery specially designed segments to every religion. So I go there, literally it is walled, and then there was a family member who said, "My goodness, even in death we are separated from one another. What is this?" So people are noticing these things that they did not notice before. So this whole notion, whatever you think, whichever way you think, that's why when you sit down and say a prayer, let's say long obedient prayer, or a hidden word, as you're saying it, as you are diving into the metaphors in that prayer, your wiring of your brain is starting to change. Literally, that's transformation. So don't underestimate the power of that transformation, especially with attention. When mindfulness came to the West, one of the things that was left behind, this is Daniel Goleman, who himself is a very practicing Buddhist. One of the things which was left behind was the ethical dimension which underlies that technique. The technique is, in isolation, can be used to justify anything, even violence. That's Daniel Goleman saying that. I think the Dalai Lama's take on this is quite interesting. What he says is that the secular use of mindfulness is not going to make people saints or change their values, but is going to lessen their suffering. So what Baha'u'llah says, he says, if you suffer for my sake, what better is that? That's what the Baha'is in Iran are sitting in the prison. Because they join with Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha in what they share that experience. What else are we thinking that is better? A few more hamburgers, a few more pizzas, I don't know. So now, by the way, the gurus of mindfulness, they like to bring Buddha into the picture. But it's not easy because people are not, but besides, as Baha'u'llah says, you can't solve the problems, present problems with the old remedies. You just cannot. So, here is, by the way, do you guys recognize this picture? What is that? This is where we had the whole series of race killings in the United States, and people got together. So given the crushing weight, this is House of Justice. This is House of Justice. This is so many years have passed of the coming of the beloved Baha'u'llah, and look where we are so far. As Baha'is, we need to move. Look at I say to myself, look at mindfulness business. They got it off the ground so wonderfully. They took it and they sold it to the market. You know what Abdul Baha says? He says, take this Joseph, he's referring to Baha'u'llah, take
take this Joseph to the market and sell it. We've got to be good salespeople to know what to do. Not sitting there passively and let things just pass by. The House of Justice, given the crushing weight of the ills burdening the peoples of the world, and seeing that a veritable cry of anguish is issuing more loudly from the hearts of those who long for some hope of relief, we, his avowed servants, can neither falter nor fail in this primary and urgent duty. We can't, but we are. Rumi's story of friendship of the bear. Oh, this I love. How many of you know this? Dusti khala khair se, the Persians say. Yeah, the friendship of the bear. Anyway, I teach it to my empowerment kids at the school, but I have a different angle for it. So this guy is traveling, and he comes across a bear, and the bear says, "Can I be your friend? I would love to be your friend. Look me, I'm so strong, I'm so tall. Anybody comes near you, I'm gonna whack him." He says, "That sounds good. Some friend, why not?" So he says, "Come along." So they go. So halfway he's tired, he wants to rest, and the bear says, "Don't worry, you just go to sleep, I'll stand guard." He says, "Okay." So after a while, a fly comes and wants to sit on his master and just shoot the fly. And then for a few seconds later, the fly comes back again, as the flies are, very persistent. You should learn from them. So he said, "Shoot." And anyways, so finally, the bear is really getting angry. He is mindful of the fact that he's angry, but he is angry. He's not going to change it. He's going to keep it, because that's going to be useful as an ammunition. Next time this fly comes, he's going to have it. So the fly comes and whoop, sits right there. And the bear is ready. He's got a boulder in his hand, and there he goes, wham! What do you think happens to the fly? The fly flies. What do you think happens to the head of his friend? Smooshed. So basically, I think Rumi is saying, you know, we have these two people within us. We got a bear, which is no brain and all fours. and then also a man who's supposed to have spiritual insight and that kind of thing. He didn't exercise it. He says, you know what, you're traveling with this bear all your life. You better not let it be the one who's guarding you, because your head is going to get smushed. And your marriage is going to go out of the world. Okay, so mindfulness does not give us value. So she says, this kid says, he says, it might not be your feng shui, but it's my feng shui. And all of you have kids, you can relate to that. Because human brain can only grasp a vague notion of what actually exists out there. And we document, this is Andrew Neuberg, how God changes this neuroscientist. He says, we document how the brain uses its perceptions to build useful models of the world, other people, morality, and God. That means each one of us, every human being out there, is using their own useful model of reality, which does not agree with us. That's why we have the problems we have in the world. Everybody is in disagreement with everybody else. Because that's why religion has become the cause of disunity, because each one of us have a God we worship that is ours. And Andrew Neuberg acknowledges that. Baha'u'llah has come to take that away, to erase that, to help us to join. So, Baha'u'llah, this is from Abdul Baha, he says, some thoughts are useless to man. They are like waves moving in the sea without result, but if the faculty of meditation is bathed in the inner light and characterized with divine attributes, the results will be confirmed. So we need to turn to the writings, really, in order to make our mindfulness and meditation being guided. It's like, you want to have an orchestra, what do you need? A conductor. Have you ever seen a whole bunch of people who play beautifully but come together, no conductor? It's chaos, right? And that's how our world is. The other thing which I really would like for us to appreciate, this is a story from the Islamic dispensation about a Arab, a Bedouin, who comes across in the desert, across a little pot of water, just a little well full of mud and everything. And he had not seen water for such a long time. To him, it's so precious. Oh my goodness. Precious present to the king, to the Khalif. So he goes over there, he enters, and he takes his muddy water, and the Khalif takes it and says, give him 1,000 dinar, but don't let him go to the other door who sees the tigress, Dajle, who's running really. He says, make sure he doesn't see it so he becomes ashamed. You know what? I think Baha'u'llah sometimes, when look at us and the way we carry ourselves, he just, I don't, خجلت نفسی مپسند. He doesn't want us to be ashamed. He says, you're good, it's okay, you're okay. Now, the meditative faculty, this is from Abdul Baha, is akin to the mirror. This is, I've considered this to be very significant. It's like a mirror, you turn it whichever way, and our soul, by the way, is like a mirror. So many people think soul is something really spiritual. No, the soul is whatever you tilt it towards, that's what it becomes. You tilt it towards, I don't know, internet, it would become good at it. You tilt it towards science, it would become good at it. You tilt it towards war, it becomes good at that. It just, whichever way you tilt it. The meditative faculty is akin to the mirror. If you put it before earthly objects, it will reflect them. Therefore, if the spirit of man is contemplating earthly subjects, he will be informed of those. But if you turn the mirror of your spirit heavenwards, which means to the writings, there's no other heavenwards that I know of, the heavenly constellations and the rays of the sun of reality will be reflected in your heart, and the virtues of the kingdom will be obtained. Therefore, let us keep this faculty rightly directed. So, really, in our virtues, being kind, being loving, we need the values of the faith, which is kind to all people of the world. Because values of the time of Moses was be kind, but be kind only to the people of your tribe, and go pillage and kill everybody else outside. So you gotta have to make sure that these two are upgraded. And so this is quick. I want to really emphasize the value of the way we make sense of reality. So for you, a quick half-a-minute exercise. If you have to pair these images into 5 pairs, there's 10 of them, half a minute. Could you do it in your mind without talking to another person? I'm just going to ask you questions. So, how would you pair them, and why? Why would you pair them the way you pair them? So let me know. I will take a sip of this water until you guys know. Who is ready? So what if you are ready? Raise your hand when you get ready. Okay. So, okay, I see that. Okay, so let's, for the sake of time, how do you pair it and why?
Me?
Yeah, and speak loudly.
Okay. So first off, I'd pair the lamp with the light bulb.
Why?
Because they both give off light.
Okay.
Then I'd pair the hat with the shoe because they're both clothes.
Okay.
Or clothing items.
They both close, hat and shoe, okay.
Then I'd pair the shadow of the person and the face, the angry looking face.
Okay.
Because they're both equal.
Okay, the angry looking face and the shadow face, both people going together, okay.
And I'd pair the cup and the saucer.
Cup and saucer,
So they're both
dishes.
yeah.
Okay. Anyone has done anything different than what she has done it? Cindy, what did you add?
I have the blowing teapot with the angry man.
Yeah.
Cindy got blowing teapot and the angry man.
The mushroom with the lamp because they both have shades.
The mushroom and the lamp because the same shape. So to make the story short, basically, if you look at it, our brain pairs things based on either function, the dishes they both serve, or shape. The third kind of pairing is metaphoric, what Cindy mentioned. Metaphoric thinking is absolutely something, we have a potential for it, but we need to train our brain to do more of it. And the Baha'i Writings is absolutely the training ground for metaphoric thinking. I tell you, sometimes, some years ago, I had a patient who was a professor of religion or whatever. And for what reason I needed to give her some Baha'i prayers to read because that would be helpful to her. She reads and said, oh, these are beautiful. What the flowery language, I've never had this before. That was many years ago, but now they are scientists who are absolutely talking very specifically about the power of metaphoric thinking. So things have changed. So here, let's see. And some of the metaphors, and I love this one, I want you to see, it says, Baha'u'llah says, I am the sun of wisdom and the ocean of knowledge. I cheer the faint and revive the dead. I am guiding light that illumineth the way. All of that is what? Is metaphor. And if you really are able to get into the metaphor, you feel the feelings. That's something that mindfulness has taught people. When we bring something, a picture into our mind, the centers of thinking and feeling are very close. So that is how Baha'u'llah wants us to teach the children about the love of Baha'u'llah, to make them familiarize them with this. Therefore, if they are close to nature, if they work in nature, they're a lot more able to say, to feel, in the garden of thine heart, plant not but the rose of love. But if they've never ever seen a rose in their life, never smelled a rose in their life, they have no idea what it looks like, but they've been in an apartment and before the TV screen all the time, they're not gonna relate to writings of Baha'u'llah. Believe me, it's not gonna be possible. So here, from the wonderful wisdom of Martin Luther King, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. So just because we are sincere and just because, it doesn't mean that we're going to really benefit the world. And for that, we really, really need to go to the writings and honestly study and honestly think and honestly reflect and honestly consult. Use our sciences, use the writings, and look and see how it guides the path for us, not to benefit ourselves, but to benefit humanity. Okay. Abdu'l-Baha says, you cannot apply the name man to any being void of this faculty of meditation. Without it, he would be a mere animal lower than beast. Why? Because animals think. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lion looks at Bambi and says, that's great. Good night, lunch. It's going to be delicious. It's thinking. But what lion cannot do, cannot think about what he thinks, to reflect on it or consult upon it. He's not going to say, oh, gee, that was a bad thought. I mean, poor Bambi, look at that. That little baby lamb, I'm not going to do that. An animal cannot do that. They only think, they feel, but they cannot think about what they think. We have the responsibility to think about what we think and change it. Mindfulness does not get into the zone of changing it. Baha'u'llah does. Okay? It is not sufficient to pray diligently for guidance, but these prayers must be followed by meditation as to the best method of action, and then action. So what do? You say prayers. Says, oh God, guide me, protect me. Okay, one. Well, how would you like it to be guided? How would you like to be protected? Who should be you protected first? From who? Guess who? Yourself. Because you're the one who's traveling. You're the bear who is traveling with the guy, so you better be knowing what not to do, what to do, otherwise you're going to get a smushed head. So the meditation, our meditation is about how I'm going to do it. Okay, I know that I need to put the ring around the neck of the cat, but how am I going to do it? You probably have to go for consultation, you know? Okay. Meditate profoundly that the secret of things. Do you remember when I said at the beginning that our brain is blind to many, especially social issues and global issues, things that we cannot we are blind. We cannot know that, these watchmen are chasing us, good for us. We cannot know the king is walking with us. We don't feel it. Our senses doesn't tell us. Meditate profoundly that the secret of things unseen may be revealed unto you. That you may inhale the sweetness of a spiritual and imperishable fragrance. And that you may acknowledge the truth, so that light may be distinguished from darkness. How do we know it is dark? How do we know it's light? Abdul says by contrast. Without contrast, you would not know. So if you don't have a notion of light, you got no notion of darkness. You should become gullible. Truth from falsehood, right from wrong, guidance from error, happiness from misery, and roses from thorns. He gives us all these that we can do is available to us if we consult, if we meditate, if we reflect. In that state, man abstracts himself. Yeah, you pull yourself out, you observe yourself. Exactly, that part is with mindfulness is the same. In that state, man withdraws himself from all outside objects, even yourself. In that subjective mood, he is immersed in an ocean of spiritual life. That means you converse with the divine spirit and can unfold the secrets of things in themselves. To illustrate this, Abdul says, he kindly guides us, he says, think of a man as endowed with two kinds of sight. When the power of insight is being used, the outward power of vision does not see. That's why we close our eyes sometimes when we want to pray. Because we don't want to be distracted by the senses, the information that our senses brings to us. Because our senses can get in the way. In fact, there's a beautiful, beautiful passage in Persian Baha'u'llah talks about, Joseph, and I don't know how many of you know the story of Joseph in Old Testament and Quran, who lost his son because the brothers were jealous. And they brought him the shirt, and they said, the bloody shirt, and they said, oh, the wolves ate it. And Joseph was sold in Egypt as a slave, but the father did not know, Jacob did not know. But he would just smell, he would just hold, smell of Joseph, whatever, and he would yearn for it. Well, some years later, when Joseph became very important in Egypt, and the brothers came to get some grain, you guys read the story, it's beautiful. Both Baha'u'llah and the Bab refer to themselves as Joseph, by the way. He put his shirt inside of the grain for the brothers to take. And when the father smelled it, he said, oh, I can smell the smell of Joseph. Baha'u'llah says, if the father had not made the physical world the barrier, he should have been able to smell the smell of Joseph all the way to Egypt without the shirt. You see? That's our capacity. That's our capacity. We should use it. So, Baha'i process of meditation is mindful of discovery of mysteries. Meditation is the key for opening the doors of mysteries. So we don't go there just to observe our thoughts. We don't go there just to see our thoughts running around and doing gymnastics. We don't go there to accept ourselves. We go there to discover mysteries. Okay? The inspiration received through meditation is of a nature that one cannot measure or determine. God can inspire into our minds things we had no previous knowledge of if He desires to do so. And by the way, many scientists speak, are you telling me at the time? Thank you. Many scientists talk about this experience, that their discoveries of science happens at the moments of contemplation, silence, hours. And sometimes when you read the history, we see Abdul sitting in Egypt at a bench looking at the sunset and closing his eyes for a long time, and once in a while opening just a little bit and closing again. He is not asleep, but he is contemplating and discovering mysteries. Perhaps for, maybe he was going to write the tablet of divine plan. We don't know, but that's what it is. So let me pause here and see if there's any questions that you have that is going to be shedding some more light that I was not going, oh, I didn't do that. Yes? Can you speak loud, please?
I do the meditation body scan every morning of John. But how do I then get the Baha'i writings or Baha'i prayers into that kind of meditation?
How do you bring it into it?
Yes.
Very simple. This is how I do it. This is how I do it with my interns, by the way. I have a bunch of interns who are not Baha'is, and they love this process. But one of the ways, because there is no set ways for Baha'i meditation. But using of the writings is absolutely a must. So what you do, you can go start with reading a story from the writings about spiritual something. Then you can read some prayers where you answer some, you have some questions. Maybe you want to know how to be loving. Maybe you want to know how to be forgiving. Maybe you want to know how to be thankful. So you go find these prayers that addresses what you're looking for. And once you become tuned into those prayers, those thoughts now are guiding your mind, then you sit down in contemplation and then you ask yourself, what did Baha'u'llah wanted me to do? How did Abu Baha wanted me to do? How did he do it? And then if you have the answer, fine. If not, that process goes on and on and on until you find the answer. So again, it's not just to be calm, that's not the big deal. But what are we doing for the rest of the world? That's the question. Thank you for that question. Anyone else has got a question? How much time do we have, by the way? 10 minutes, so that's not very much. Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll go on and just continue with the rest. Yes, at the end. Very good question. I'm going to repeat. Okay. I'm going to repeat your question so that everybody hears it. It said, as a therapist, what would be some of the techniques that you use integrating the writings? Am I understanding correct?
Well, as someone is reflecting with you, and that reflection be done individually without the use of a therapist during meditation?
Well, it has to start with a question that you have. So let's say you say, I like to get along with my spouse much better, or with my children, or with my neighbor, or with the Baha'is who are getting on my nerve, or something like that. So, Baha'u'llah send them together on your nerves so you figure out how to do exercise and develop strong muscles. So you start with that question, and then you go to the writings, and you look on the prayers, and you look, and you look, and you look, until you say, oh yeah, this one really is addressing it. And then you read that, and you really ask yourself question, do I know how to put this into action? Do I know how to go about it? And that becomes your next question. So when you read it, it's okay, how do I feel about this? I feel really very, very grateful for this guidance. How am I going to translate this into action? Maybe you need to go consult. Maybe you do need to go to a therapist and consult. I don't know. But if you can do it by yourself, you got something free and donate the money to the fund. Did I answer your question? Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so who else has got some question about what we discussed? Yes, please. Oh my goodness. I didn't know you're there. I was looking for you in India.
In the writings, it always talks about prayer and meditation. And just to follow up on that question, the role of prayer in meditation.
Exactly, the role of prayer. See, prayer is something we choose to say as a request, as a communication, as a conversation with God. Generally, prayer is identified by us as something that we say to God. So, tablets are something that God is giving us as an instruction, but prayer is what we invoke, what we say. So, it is nice. I know people, at the beginning of every session, I say to the Baha'is, I say, find me a prayer that really speaks to what you're going to be discussing with me, so both of us will know where to go. And, sometimes I hear people, oh, I'm just going to say this remover of difficulty. I said, did you look for it, or you just had it? Oh, no, I just say that. I said, I want you to really go look for something like serendipity. Go into the forest and find me this most fragrant flower that addresses the need of you today. Like if you have cold, you go into the forest, you find something that addresses that. So go find me that. And after a while, they come and say, you know what? I have learned so many new prayers. I have become familiar with so many new prayers. So yes, the prayer would illuminate the path. And then as Abdul says, your contemplation and meditation will be about, and the garden says, how to act on that you get guidance about it. So the two together? Does that answer that? Trip is always, you know Trip author, he does, and there's his other wing over here. they really make a lot of mischief around the world with their consultation and workshops and stuff like that. Yes.
Hi, just a comment. I don't know you, but it's such a delight to listen to you. So if you ever have moments of doubt, know that you have profoundly reached me. Because you have integrated your profession and your spirituality.
I appreciate that. It's very gratifying. I am very grateful for all the masters and dedicated souls, angels that have guided my path. And so I'm the beneficiary of that. Well, thank you for that. We all are swimming in the same ocean. And we all have his assistance. And there's no drowning. Because he says, drown yourself in the ocean of my words. It's a good thing. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, should I just go? I will use a few. How many more minutes do we have?
5 more.
Okay, let's see what we have in the. One of my interns again, who's not a Baha'i, said, "Oh, I just discovered you cannot contemplate and talk at the same time. So I have to be quiet. Oh, how can I do that?" The sign of contemplation is silence, because it is impossible, Abdul says, for a man to do the two things at the same time. He cannot speak and meditate. So isn't that refreshing? Once in a while we have to be quiet. And then it says, the holy manifestations of God come into the world to dispel the darkness of the animal or physical nature of man. Get it? So we don't sit and observe our animal nature doing gymnastics and say, oh, I see you. No, we say, come over here, my goodness. No, you cannot do that. Let's see what we can do. To purify him from his imperfections, in order that his heavenly and spiritual nature may become quickened. That means we are not quickened. You guys know the Quicken, that software that you guys do your accounting? We're going to become quickened. His divine qualities awakened. That means we are asleep. Our divine qualities are asleep. They're not awakened. His perfections visible. That means it is not visible. And it needs to be visible. His potential powers revealed. That means our power of concentration, power of will. Paula says, I want you to have a very strong will so you can surrender it to me. Because will cannot be surrendered so easily. All the virtues of the world of humanity latent within him may come to life. Latent means it's dormant, it's potential, it's not realized, it has to manifest. It's like a seed. If you don't plant it, you don't see the oak tree. Nothing. Now, so here it says, in your mind's browser, clear your cache. Now delete your history. Now navigate to a blank web page. Impossible. Impossible. So, but wishful thinking. And then, I like this one. So, you know, we as Baha'is, Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, give us really out-of-the-box solutions. So, you know, we have out-of-the-box solution, we better use it. It says there are no set forms of meditation prescribed in the teachings. No plan as such for inner development. Can you imagine that? No plan. That means you got to be active part of it. You design the course. And the friends are urged and they enjoin to pray, and they also should meditate, but the manner of doing the latter is left entirely to the individual. You know, I have a picture of a Sufi doing sama, you know, they go and they wear these clothes and they twirl around. Baha'u'llah visited them in Turkey when he was there. But the Guardian says, we cannot go pick that thing and then teach it at the Baha'i school. Because everybody kind of looked at that and said, is this something Baha'is probably do? So we don't want to set patterns of doing strange ways or stuff like that. You want to sit and meditate, go sit on top of a tree, I don't care. Go sit beside the tree. Go sit by the pool. Go sit by the ocean. Do whatever. But all you have to do is be quiet and have a prayer in your mind, ask some questions, which will be hopefully will lead you to some action. Right? Are we finished? No, one more. God will no doubt inspire whosoever detaches himself from all else but him, including ourselves, and will cause the pure waters of wisdom and utterance to gush out and flow copiously from his heart. Remember, by the way, most of the scientists only focus on what? On the brain, no, not the mind. They don't even know anything about the mind, and they acknowledge it, by the way, nothing about the mind. But they focus on the brain. But what does Baha'u'llah talk about? The learning of your heart. Yes, our heart. And we underestimate how much our heart is an instrument of learning and wisdom. Okay. So, he says, all we have in this life, in life is this moment. No, wait, this moment. Actually, this moment. Well, really, this moment. I mean, after all, because cut off. And then, the purpose of the one true God, exalted be his glory, is revealing himself to men, is to lay bare those gems that lie hidden within the mind of their true and inmost self. So, what do you mean by these gems that lie within the mind of ourselves? This self is not the lower self. This self is the spiritual self. The Guardian says, don't go look in the mirror for yourself. That's not where you are. Where do we go to look for yourself? In the writings. That's where you are. If you don't see yourself in the writings, you are looking in the wrong place. And you're not going to ever find you. So this whole notion of, I want to do it by myself. I like to acknowledge myself. All of these things you have to ask, what are you talking about? Who is it? And that self does not make a marriage succeed. Does not. That self will challenge the unity of a community, of a marriage, of a relationship between a child and parents. It does. Because that self is divisive. It's not uniting. If it was for that self, then what would be the point of Baha'u'llah coming, and Abdul Baha coming, and the Guardian coming, and the Moses coming, and Buddha coming? What would be the point of it? And so, that's contemplation. That the diverse communions, and this I found to be very illuminating. I mean, Baha'u'llah really says it here. He says that diverse communions of the earth and the manifold systems of religious belief. That's what mindfulness cannot detect. Systems cannot. Only can see the self, the individual self, yeah, but not systems. That the manifold systems of religious belief should never be allowed to foster the feelings of animosity among men. Never be allowed. Baha'u'llah says that should not happen. We have to ask ourselves, how are we going to help this? So that would never happen. Because the action is upon us. He's giving us the instruction. In this day of essence of the faith of God and his religion, it says, these principles and laws, these firmly established and mighty systems, means all the religions of the past, mighty systems, have proceeded from one source and are the rays of one light. That they differ one from another is to be attributed to the varying requirements of the ages in which they were promulgated. We need to be the one who would be going out there and teaching it. So if you go to a mindfulness, whatever, if there is room for you to share and they allow it, that you would share your ideas, which I kind of doubt it because that would perturb everybody probably, that's what you're going to do. So if you want to create a devotional in your home when you would read the prayers and then you discuss, be my guest, because that's the way to do it. It reminds me of this, just this past summer, Phil Zuckerman brings every summer his students of sociology, religious comparison, to our house for the part that has to do with the faith, Baha'i faith. So this year I thought, I'm not going to tell them all about it. I'm going to let them tell each other all about it. So what I did, I put a whole bunch of prayer books and writings on the table. There were about 8 or 10 of them. I said, you all go through it and find whatever it is that speaks to you. And then you read it and you tell us what did you get. It was fascinating. All of a sudden there was nobody who was above the other. Nobody was telling the others what to do. I wasn't the authority. And so everybody picked something that they wanted and they talked very passionately about it. So with this one girl, by the way, she picked up this passage about the equality of men and women. And then she said, when everybody kind of listened to it, she raised her hand and she said, no, but you guys are not understanding. This is not saying that just we are equal. This is saying that women need to become so educated, like scholars, that they should be the leaders of educating their own children. She went way to the meaning of, and nobody could contest her because she was reading it and she was explaining it. And the Chinese girl from China, who just was there, she picked the prayer book in Chinese and she read it. Of course, we couldn't understand a word she said. And then she translated it. She said, this prayer, it says, the future of China is great. And she was so proud. And I said, that's how we should do it. We should each find something that we really relate to, for where we are, for the pains that we have endured, for the trials and tribulations that we've had. Pick something that speaks our heart and share it with others with passion. I thank you so much for your wonderful